Rick's Recaps welcome you to another movie, 4x4. While strolling down a quiet street, Cairo spotted a car without an alarm system. Recognizing it as an easy target, he saw an opportunity. The neighborhood had a high crime rate, forcing residents to take extra security measures. Despite numerous surveillance cameras in the area, Cairo remained undeterred. After breaking into the car, he quickly removed the stereo and placed it in his backpack. He then found a pair of sunglasses and decided to take them as well. Before leaving, he left an unpleasant surprise for the wealthy owner by soiling the rear seats in the worst way possible. To avoid being noticed by pedestrians, he hid nearby and waited for the street to clear. When Cairo thought the coast was clear, he attempted to open the car door, but to his shock, it wouldn't budge. No matter how hard he pulled, all 4 doors remained locked. He then tried the trunk, but that too was sealed shut. Desperate, he kicked the window, but it didn't break. Searching for another way out, he rummaged through the trunk and found a tire lever. Using it to smash the glass, he was stunned when nothing happened. Frustrated, he tore off the panel of one of the doors and forced his arm inside, hoping to unlock it manually. Instead of escaping, all he managed to do was severely scratch his arm. As his desperation grew, he tried ripping through the car's carpet, but he quickly realized there was no way out. As a last resort, Cairo reached for the gun in his backpack and fired at the windshield. However, he failed to realize that the bullet would ricochet, striking him in the leg. Shocked and in pain, he remained silent for a moment, trying to process what had happened. When he finally regained his senses, he tore off his shirt and wrapped it around his wound in an attempt to stop the bleeding. Yet despite the gunshot, the glass remained completely intact. A woman walked past the car while applying lipstick, unaware of Cairo's frantic attempts to get her attention. He banged on the window and screamed, but she didn't notice. The car was soundproof, making it impossible for anyone outside to hear or see him. Growing desperate, Cairo honked the horn repeatedly, but nothing worked. At this point, he still had no idea who had trapped him inside. What he did know, however, was that he was in serious trouble. Whoever had designed this trap had ensured there was no escape. Panicked, he reached for his phone and called his wife. But before he could finish the conversation, his battery died. With no way to communicate and his options dwindling, he drank the last drops of soda left in a bottle. Feeling exhausted and hopeless, he slumped into the back seat, resigned to waiting for help while trapped with his own filth. The only company Cairo has inside the car is a cricket. After 24 hours with no one coming to his rescue, he wakes up dehydrated. Desperate for water, he licks the few droplets trickling down the window. In frustration, he tries to break open the door once again, but eventually gives up. Instead, he returns the stolen stereo and plays some music to lift his spirits. Just then, the burglar receives a strange call from an unfamiliar device. Cairo hesitantly answers the call and is met with the voice of Dr. Enrique, his captor. The doctor introduces himself, revealing that he was born in Kiln 60 years ago and is now a widower. He explains that this is the 29th time he has been robbed, and unlike before, he decided to handle the situation differently. To trap the thief, he installed an alarm that alerts his phone whenever someone enters the car. Using his device, Enrique remotely locked all the doors, making it impossible for Cairo to escape without his key. The vehicle is entirely soundproof and armored, with tinted glass that prevents anyone from seeing inside. Enrique shares that he grew up in a middle-class neighborhood where people used to leave their doors unlocked without fear. He then asks Cairo a question. What would he do if he caught his own son stealing? When Cairo hesitates and says he doesn't know, the doctor abruptly hangs up. Furious, Cairo shouts in rage, threatening to kill Enrique once he escapes. At that moment, Enrique remotely activates the car's air conditioning, providing Cairo with a moment of relief from the heat. However, the temperature quickly plummets, turning the vehicle into a freezing chamber. Cairo desperately tries to turn it off, but the controls no longer respond. He puts his shirt back on and uses a torn piece of his pants to cover his wound. To block the cold air, he stuffs paper and a car mat into the vents. Hours later, when Cairo is nearly frozen, the temperature inside the car finally begins to rise again. He then receives another call from Enrique. Once more, the doctor asks what Cairo would do if he caught his son stealing, and again, Cairo struggles to answer. This time, Enrique shares a personal story. His daughter was robbed while parking her car in the garage. Two thieves not only stole all her money and valuables, but also held Enrique's 5-year-old grandson at gunpoint for 3 terrifying hours. Fearing for their safety, his daughter eventually moved her family to Barcelona for better security. As Enrique finishes his story, the call suddenly disconnects. Just then, Ciro spots a police car approaching, filling him with hope. Desperate to be rescued, he bangs on the window and yells for help. One of the officers steps out and inspects the vehicle, but unable to see or hear anything inside, he simply issues a parking ticket and drives away, leaving Ciro trapped once again. That afternoon, as Ciro suffers from extreme thirst, he watches the rain falling outside. Just then, Enrique calls again, asking for his full name and ID number. The doctor offers him water in exchange for this information, essentially saving his life. Desperate, Ciro complies, and Enrique directs him to check the wash hose in the back of the car. He finds a bottle and drinks from it, only to realize the water is contaminated. Though his thirst is quenched for now, hunger becomes his new and more pressing concern. If he doesn't eat soon, he risks starving to death. The next morning, despite his injuries, Cairo remains determined to break down the door. However, his weakened state makes him realize that escaping on his own is impossible. Admitting his suffering, he tells Enrique that he has developed a fever after accidentally shooting himself in the leg. Concerned, the doctor inquires about the wound and turns on the heater as they talk. He then shares some grim news. Earlier that day, he received his medical test results and learned that his cancer has spread throughout his body. If things go as expected, he has just over a year to live. Ciro, barely conscious, faints as Enrique recounts the 28 times he has been robbed. When he wakes up, he is convinced he won't last much longer. Desperate, he rips out a page from a book and eats it, hoping to stave off his hunger. To prevent dying of dehydration, he begins personalizing the interior of the car, leaving marks that might one day indicate his presence to anyone who discovers the vehicle. His greatest fear is that his body will be discarded somewhere without his family ever knowing what happened to him. Pushed to the absolute limit, Cairo starts collecting his own bodily fluids and re-drinking them. He never imagined he would experience such inhumane conditions, not even in his worst nightmares. Later that day, another man attempts to break into the 4x4, but before he can succeed, 2 bystanders catch him in the act and beat him mercilessly. The attempted thief is still being attacked when the police arrive, and they quickly take him into custody. Starving beyond belief, Ciro considers eating the insect that has been his only companion for the past 2 days. However, as he watches the tiny creature struggle for survival just like him, he ultimately decides to spare its life. Many hours later, he is startled awake by another call from Enrique, who informs him that a candy is hidden in the back of the car. The doctor, for once, seems to be in a good mood. Ciro rushes to grab the candy and devours it before Enrique can hang up. Desperate, he pleads for more water and a cigarette. With nothing else to do, he observes the daily routines of the nearby houses and notices a repeating pattern. If he were free, he could easily rob everyone on that street. During his observations, he spots a local beggar who, after eating 2 rotten apples the day before, has now found a slice of pizza in the trash. Starving, Ciro envies the man's luck. Later, he continues working on a way to open the car door and finally succeeds. He screams at the top of his lungs, but his cries go unheard. The hole he manages to create using a tool from the trunk is too small for anyone to notice. Just then, Enrique calls again, this time bringing up Ciro's wife and son, Irina and Lionel. Fear grips him as he worries about their safety, but Enrique unexpectedly shares good news. He claims to have given Irina $150,000 in cash, telling her that Ciro won the lottery. Enrique even advised her to buy a house to avoid rent and use the rest for their son's education. The doctor then declares that Ciro doesn't deserve his family. He reveals that through a police contact, he obtained Ciro's file and learned that he had killed someone before. Ciro defends himself, saying it was self-defense. The tire shop owner had attacked him with a knife during a robbery, forcing him to shoot. He insists that his years in prison were punishment enough for his crime. Enrique tells him he has been chosen and is now sentenced to yet another punishment. Unable to sleep, Ciro realizes he will be imprisoned for a long time. In a symbolic act, he decides to help his cricket companion escape, wishing it luck. While fidgeting, he accidentally starts the car by pressing the ignition button. He then buckles up, shifts into reverse, and deliberately crashes the vehicle. The impact shatters the glass, allowing him to escape. Barely able to walk, he stumbles through town until he reaches a convenience store. Rushing inside, he grabs a bottle of water from the freezer and devours 2 hamburgers. A security guard approaches and orders him to leave. Suddenly, Cairo pulls out a gun and shoots the guard in the chest. At that moment, he jolts awake. It was all a dream. Weak, in pain, and losing hope, he prepares to end his life, placing the gun under his chin. Just then, his thoughts are interrupted by a phone call. Cairo pleads with Enrique to let him see his son one last time, but the doctor refuses. In desperation, the thief threatens to take his own life, but his weapon malfunctions and his plan fails. A moment later, the car's headlights switch on at Enrique's command, finally revealing his face. To mask the foul smell inside, Enrique enters the vehicle and sprays air freshener to help Cairo relax. He then grabs the gun, lights a cigarette, and places it in Cairo's mouth. The thief screams in agony as Enrique extracts the bullet from his leg. As Enrique answers a patient's call, Cairo seizes the opportunity, grabs the gun, and shoots him before making his escape. However, the doctor survives with only minor injuries and immediately chases after him. Just as Enrique is about to recapture his prisoner, a policewoman on patrol arrives at the scene and detains him instead. Enrique tries to justify his actions by claiming that he was punishing a car thief and assisting the police in their duty. However, the officer orders him to release Cairo and points a revolver at him. 2 hours later, the standoff remains unchanged. Enrique tells Cairo that he only seeks justice and refuses to set him free. Sensing an opportunity, Cairo uses the presence of journalists and bystanders to turn the situation in his favor. Enrique then puts the matter to the crowd, asking whether they believe the thief should be executed or released. When the police realize that public opinion is siding with Enrique, they decide to involve a negotiator named Mario. Standing beside his car with a revolver pressed against Cairo's neck, Enrique watches as the weakened thief, now barely conscious, resigns himself to his fate. The doctor finds it outrageous that a criminal could break into his home, steal his car, and still expect to escape punishment. When the retired negotiator arrives, he tells Enrique that he has come to help resolve the situation. Enrique insists that enforcing the law is the only way to truly help society. Mario acknowledges Enrique's anger, stating that many others share the same frustration. However, he warns that killing Cairo will change nothing, as countless criminals exist in the world. Taking one life would only lead Enrique to ruin, destroying his own future in the process. Despite Mario's words, Enrique remains resolute, believing that even if his actions don't change the world, he is at least making an effort. Otherwise, he says, his only option would be to leave the country, just like his daughter did. Mario counters that Enrique has already done enough and that Cairo has learned his lesson. He urges him to let the thief go, but instead Enrique turns back to the crowd, addressing those who have been victims of theft. Enrique asks the crowd a question, noting that despite having advanced security systems and barred windows, many of them have still been victims of theft. In response, most people raise their hands, seeking his attention. After the situation is de-escalated and Enrique gives his approval, the police negotiator offers him some water. A policewoman approaches, hands him a bottle, and then steps away. Enrique bends down and kisses the back of her hand before taking a sip. He then passes the bottle to Cairo, who is severely dehydrated at that point. Mario steps forward once more, urging Enrique to release Cairo. He shares a bit about his own life, revealing that his wife has passed away and they never had children. Now he lives alone, with no close family or many friends, surviving only on his modest retirement pension. Mario explains all this to show that he has nothing to lose, and after everything is over, he simply wants to invite Enrique over for a beer. The doctor then thinks of his daughter and realizes she does not deserve to be remembered as the child of a man who took a thief's life. This thought makes him decide to let Cairo go. He then gets into his car, knowing that this was not the legacy he wanted to leave behind, before moving on. The police immediately take Cairo into custody and place him in handcuffs. The bystanders struggle to understand why Enrique chose to release the man after holding him captive for 5 hours. Meanwhile, as the officers attempt to detain Enrique, Cairo is led to a police vehicle. At that moment, Mario notices Enrique's arm placing a countdown timer on the car's roof. Realizing it's a bomb, he urgently warns the officers to step back. As the car explodes, Enrique is burned alive. The shocking outcome leaves everyone in disbelief, unable to grasp how such an unusual case unfolded. Meanwhile, Cairo exhales in relief, knowing he has survived the most harrowing ordeal of his life. So what would you rate this film? If you have any thoughts, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more movie recaps.